By the 1830s, James and Cynthia McClellan had secured the frontier American dream. Their 600-acre estate in Shelby County, Illinois, was one of the largest in the area, boasting massive timber reserves, abundant livestock, and direct market routes to Chicago. They were deeply comfortable. Then, in 1839, they liquidated it all. They sold the prime farmland for a fraction of its worth, packed up their children, and deliberately walked away from their established wealth. The immediate result of that choice was a plunge into absolute poverty. Both James and Cynthia were stricken with crippling rheumatism, leaving them bedridden for 3 months. Their 60 head of cattle wandered off in a desperate search for their old home, and half the herd froze to death trapped in an icy river. This split-screen timeline puts the macro milestones of early Mormon history side by side with the McClellan family ledger. Look closely, and you'll see that the family's specific dates of baptism, birth, migration, and burial map perfectly onto the broader, tragic timeline of the church. The McClellan ledger offers a granular view of the forces driving this mass movement, detailing the specific daily costs of a conviction that spanned decades. This sketch captures the Mormon temple in Nauvoo, Illinois, the physical epicenter of their new religion. Following their 1839 baptism, the McClellans migrated here, seeking community but finding a very harsh reality. They had traded hundreds of acres of cultivated farmland for whatever they could scrape together. Eventually, they were handing over their few remaining oxen just to secure raw lumber. The physical toll was severe. The rheumatism they contracted upon arrival left both parents completely incapacitated, unable to walk or work for an entire quarter of the year. This forced their 13-year-old son, William, to take on the survival of the entire household. He had to manage the freezing livestock entirely alone. Nauvoo functioned as a harsh physical filter. It stripped incoming converts of their material safety nets, testing whether their spiritual convictions could outlast total financial and bodily ruin. In the summer of 1846, they were forced across the Mississippi River. The family found themselves entirely vulnerable, camped at Mosquito Creek in Iowa, preparing to push west. But instead of heading straight to Utah, James and his underage son William enlisted in the Mormon Battalion, joining the U.S. military for the Mexican War. As seen in this Fort Moore relief, a massive contingent of Mormon men marched off to serve. Assigned to a detachment of invalids, James and William endured a grueling march through Colorado, eventually following the Pioneer Trail to arrive in the Salt Lake Valley in July of 1847. The physical demands didn't stop there. Just 2 weeks after arriving in the valley, James turned right back around. He joined a party of men and marched back across the plains to retrieve the rest of his family at winter quarters. When he finally arrived late that October, he was met with devastating news. While he was marching thousands of miles through the desert, his own parents had passed away back in Nauvoo. External national conflicts recast the religious migration as a militarized survival campaign, physically shattering the family unit just as they reached the plains. This map tracks their final push. In 1850, the family crossed the Missouri River, starting west along the Overland Trail. As they traveled up Ash Hollow, they drank stagnant water. Cholera broke out immediately, sweeping through the wagons. William survived a severe infection, but his 2-year-old brother Jimmy did not. The illness hit daughter Louisa so hard they ordered 2 graves dug, though she was spared. In the wake of burying a toddler, they pushed to the Black Hills, where Cynthia gave birth. Too weak to nurse, she relied on William's wife, who was nursing her own 6-week-old, to feed both infants on the trail. The Overland Trail demanded a brutal interdependence. Survival depended entirely on a cycle of community sacrifice, rather than individual strength. The McClellans made it to Utah. James spent the next few decades working as a blacksmith and community leader in the settlement of Payson, eventually passing away in 1881. But the question remains, what specific belief makes a lifetime of poverty, disease, and burying your children along a dirt trail worth the cost? Years later, a grandson asked William McClellan exactly that. William pointed to a specific, warm afternoon back in Illinois, working in the cornfield with his father. They were about to quit for the day when an eerie, terrifying stillness fell over the field. Suddenly, the leaves on the corn drooped and wilted, as if struck by a blast of extreme heat. The trees around them sagged in deep sorrow. James stood up, looked at his son, and said, "Will, something has happened to the prophet." They would later learn that at that exact moment, Joseph Smith had been assassinated in Carthage. This witnessed spiritual conviction anchored the McClellans through decades of loss. It was the specific evidence they needed to justify every mile walked and every child buried.